Speak for me. You know my heart better than these other men. I will not lose the child. And she looks at him and she goes, look to it. Right? We talk about that? Did we get that far? Okay. So, all right. We're starting to piece together that, he's the guy. So is Chillingworth. Because Chillingworth is there at the governor's mansion and in that garden listening to all this, right? He's become like this important figure in town. He's the doctor. So he's there and he's looking at how Dimmesdale, pleads Hester's case and thinks, this is a passionate guy. Maybe I need to keep an eye on him. All right? Now, one of the things that I need y'all to know, and this is probably going to be on your quiz on Friday, okay? So you might want to jot some of this stuff down, is that when Dimmesdale speaks for Hester, his argument is essentially what she has already said, except it's coming from a minister, right? So they pay attention to it. He says, God gave her the child. And he says something like, she has these unique traits that will allow her to, deal with the child, okay? So essentially, the argument is if God gave Hester the child, who are we to take the child away? If we were to take the child away, it would be like going against God. Okay, does that make sense? So that is a very compelling argument, and they decide to let her keep Pearl. And heading out of the governor's yard, in a footnote, it tells us about Mistress Hibbins. Okay, Mistress Hibbins is the governor's sister, and now the governor and Mistress Hibbins are both historical figures. Okay, they lived. Some Hester Prynne is made up. Okay, but this governor, the name that he's given, Governor Wilson, that's the real governor at the time. And his sister, we find out, was executed as a witch before the Salem witch trials. So here's a woman who is not just peculiar and odd, but people think she's a witch, right? Well, as Hester is leaving the governor's home with Pearl, right? Mistress Hibbins looks out of the window and she yells out at Hester, Mistress Prynne, won't you come to the forest this evening? The prince would love to see you. Prince being whom, do you think? Who lives in the forest?
The devil.
The devil, right? So she basically says, Hester, come, frolic with Satan. Join us in the forest tonight. Hester says, had they taken Pearl away from me, I would have gladly gone into the forest with you. In other words, had they taken Pearl, I would have had nothing to lose, right? And Hawthorne steps in, the speaker, and he says, even in this moment, we see that Pearl is keeping her mother in line. Because Pearl is supposed to be not just her mother's joy, but what? Her mother's punishment too, right? Pearl is the letter. The letter is Pearl. Got that? Very important. Okay. So Chillingworth, he looks at all of this. He sees how Dimmesdale fights for Hester to keep the child. And he's thinking about it, all right? Well, in the meantime, he's the town doctor. He's become, this eminent, respected figure in the community. And he's a bachelor, supposedly, right? Dimmesdale is a bachelor. Dimmesdale is sick and looking sicker every day. Chillingworth is a physician that happens to show up. And the townspeople decide, wouldn't it be a good idea for the two of them as bachelors to live together so that the doctor can cure the patient? And that's what happens when we get into chapter 10. Now, what's the title of chapter 10? The Leech and His Patient. Okay. So I know that you may not have gotten this far in your reading, but this is the only chance I got to talk to y'all before you take that quiz. So I'm going to take that opportunity. The leech is Chillingworth. He's called a leech because he's a doctor. And what are leeches? Do you know?
They're like little slugs that like suck.
Yeah, they look like slugs. They're little creatures that are found in like swampy material or, water. And they will actually like adhere to you and suck the blood out of you. Not all of it. They're not a vampire, okay? And doctors back in the old days would use leeches to bleed people because they thought that a lot of ailments were caused by like an imbalance of the blood or an imbalance of what they called like the humors, okay? So they would either bleed patients by like cutting them and bleeding them, or use leeches because they were, less painful, and the leeches would suck the blood and like a big tick would kind of bubble up, and then they, kind of fall off or they'd be pulled off. Look it up. Good stuff. All right. So leeches, often physicians would be referred to as leeches. But here's the thing. Chillingworth is not just a leech because he's a physician, but because he is going to be a parasite. And who is his host? Well, he's looking for the host, but we know it's going to be Dimmesdale. Okay? So the leech and his patient, they're sharing a roof. Well, one day, Chillingworth comes back with these flabby, ugly weeds, okay? Go about 3 pages into chapter 10. Look for a paragraph that starts with "even in the graveyard" and tell me when you find it. Got it? Got highlighters? We'll need some highlighters, okay? All right, so Chillingworth has been out. You know that doctors back then especially would pick flowers and bark from trees and herbs and weeds, and they would use them for medicine, okay? So he has picked these flabby, ugly weeds. And Dimmesdale remarks upon them. He says, "Where'd you find those?" And this is what Chillingworth says. "Even in the graveyard here at hand," they lived next to a graveyard, okay? "Even in the graveyard here at hand," answered the physician, continuing his employment, "they are new to me." Highlight all this. "I found them growing on a grave which bore no tombstone, no other memorial of the dead man except these ugly weeds that they have taken upon themselves to keep him in remembrance. They grew out of his heart and typified maybe some hideous secret that was buried with him and which he had done better to confess during his lifetime." So he says, look, I found these in the graveyard growing out of an unmarked grave. Maybe they grow out of this man's heart and they represent a hidden sin that he took to the grave with him. A hidden sin that has now grown out of his heart and manifested as this ugly weed that has, grown so that it is finally out into the open. Miss Hammett with her laugh. That's funny. All right. So he says, maybe this man took a secret to the grave with him. Okay? And he says he probably should have told that secret while he was living so that he wouldn't have been burdened. And Dimmesdale says this, "Perchance," which means perhaps, said Dimmesdale, "he earnestly desired to tell the secret, but could not." Now, of course, who is Dimmesdale talking about? Himself. Because, there's a part of him that wanted Hester to name him, right? Because he doesn't have the courage to, admit to his own sin, okay? So, Chillingworth, suspecting Dimmesdale, is baiting him. You know what I mean by that, right? Baiting him. He's trying to see how he's probing. He's trying to see what Dimmesdale's going to say. Dimmesdale says, well, maybe he wanted to say something but couldn't. And
know already?
Chillingworth, not yet. He thinks might be the guy, but he's not sure. And wherefore, rejoined the physician, wherefore not? Since all the powers of nature call so earnestly for the confession of sin, and these black weeds have sprung up out of a buried heart to make manifest an unspoken crime. Okay? Wherefore, by the way, means why. Okay? Why not? Not where not, but why not? So why wouldn't you tell a secret, as you are living? Caleb, you with me? Just making sure, okay? That, good sir, highlight this too, is a fantasy of yours, replied the minister. Keep highlighting. There can be, if I forbode aright, no power short of divine mercy to disclose, whether by uttered words or type or emblem, the secrets that may be buried within a human heart. The heart, making itself guilty of such secrets, must hold them until the day when all hidden things be revealed. What do you think a minister would feel the day would be when all secrets would be revealed?
Day of judgment.
Yes, judgment day. Good, make a note of that. So he says, no. Secrets don't necessarily have to come out while you're living. They're going to come out at judgment day. And he goes on to say something like, a man's sin is between himself and his creator. Okay? Now on the next page, and I'm paraphrasing here, he says something like, a man might also try to do good deeds in the world. And if he told a secret sin, then his attempts to do good deeds would,
Be shown.
Yeah, be wasted. Or maybe he would no longer be trusted to do good in the world. And again, he's talking about himself. Okay, now I think that's probably his justification for not coming forward. That he's a minister and people revere him and they love him and he wants them to listen to his advice. And he's telling himself, if I were to come clean, I wouldn't be able to do the good that I do. Honestly, I think that's his excuse. Because truly, I think he's just a wuss, in my professional opinion. Okay? All right, now, skip ahead about 2 pages. Look for a paragraph that starts before Roger Chillingworth could answer. Do you see it? So they start, they're basically having this philosophical discussion about whether it's better to tell your sin or not. And then here we are interrupted. Before Roger Chillingworth could answer, they heard the clear, wild laughter of a young child's voice proceeding from the adjacent burial ground. Looking instinctively from the open window, it was summertime, the minister beheld Hester Prynne and little Pearl passing along the footpath that traversed the enclosure. Pearl looked as beautiful as the day, but was in one of those moods, highlight this, of perverse merriment, which whenever they occurred seemed to remove her entirely out of the sphere of sympathy or human contact. In other words, she's in one of those moods where she does not even look human. Okay? She now skipped irreverently from one grave to another until coming to the broad flat tombstone of a departed worthy, maybe even Isaac Johnson himself, she began to dance upon it. So she literally starts dancing on a grave. Okay? Now y'all, at this point, she's like 3 or 4. She's, old enough to where she really probably should know better. Okay? Her mom's going to try to correct her. Okay? In reply to her mother's command and entreaty that she behave decorously, little Pearl paused to gather, highlight all this, prickly burrs from a tall burdock which grew beside the tomb. Taking a handful of these, she arranged them along the lines of the scarlet letter that decorated the maternal bosom, to which the burrs, as their nature was, tenaciously adhered. Hester did not pluck them off. So she stops dancing on the grave, but she picks these little couple burrs, right? And she outlines the letter A with them. And we know enough to know that the letter A is not just cloth on Hester's chest. I mean, it's got these powers, right? Because the work is a romance and it's got, supernatural elements to it. So every time she puts one of those little burrs on that letter on Hester's chest, Hester feels it. but she does not. She doesn't even get irritated with, or she doesn't show it at least, but she just accepts it. She doesn't take them off. Why? Why wouldn't Hester take these things off, or at least fuss and ask Pearl to stop?
She's not ashamed.
She's taking her punishment. Good, Nicole. Remember, Pearl is not just her joy, she is her torture. And so, she's going to accept this. Like, she deserves it. She knows she is paying for her punishment there, or paying for her crimes there. Okay? All right, now, the minister and the doctor are going to talk about how Pearl comes of a broken law, so she's kind of a wild child. All right, go to the last page of the chapter. So Chillingworth is seeing Dimmesdale's behavior, and he's thinking about it, and he's thinking about it, and he's thinking about it, and he's determined he's going to find some kind of proof, right? Well, as you read, we find out that that the minister often will like put his hand over his heart, when he gets nervous or agitated. So one day, finally, Chillingworth's gonna get some proof, okay? Dimmesdale falls asleep. Middle of the day, falls asleep, deep sleep, and Chillingworth kind of like creeps up on him, right? He's gonna pull away the cloth that always covers Dimmesdale's chest. All right, so let's see. Third paragraph from the bottom, do y'all see where it says, "Then indeed Mr. Dimmesdale shuddered"? You got that? Now go up about 4 lines and highlight for me. The physician advanced. Do y'all see it? Highlight this. The physician advanced directly in front of the vestment. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Directly in front of his patient, laid his hand upon his bosom and thrust aside the vestment, that's the cloth, that hitherto always covered it, Dimmesdale's chest, from his professional eye. Then indeed Mr. Dimmesdale shuddered and slightly stirred, and after a brief pause, the physician turned away. Highlight the entire next paragraph. But with what a wild look of wonder, joy, and horror, with what a ghastly rapture, as it were, too mighty to be expressed only by the eye, and the features therefore bursting forth through the whole ugliness of his figure, making itself even riotously manifest by the extravagant gestures with which he threw up his arms to the ceiling and stamped his foot upon the floor. I mean, he's doing this kind of like evil dance, right? He's so excited about whatever it is that he saw. Had a man seen old Roger Chillingworth at that moment of his ecstasy, he would have had no need to ask how Satan comports, that means behaves, himself when a precious human soul is lost to heaven and won into his kingdom. Hawthorne does not tell us what he sees on Dimmesdale's chest. Whatever it is, though, he's real excited to see it. So we can assume that it's proof that connects Dimmesdale to Hester. So what do you think is probably on that chest? Probably his own letter A. Whether he has like carved it into himself or branded himself, or whether like those flabby weeds that grew out of the heart of the center, it's like eating its way from the inside out to where it's visible on the outside. We don't know. Hawthorne leaves it to our imagination, okay? But it's there, and it connects him to Hester, probably explains why he puts his hand over his heart, right? When he gets nervous and agitated. And Chillingworth is so excited that he's compared to what, or I guess whom? Satan. To Satan when he's won a soul to hell. So, like Satan wins a soul to hell, Chillingworth, the leech, is going to torment the soul of Dimmesdale. Okay? All right, now I know I skipped ahead to talk about this. If you have not read that much on your own, you got to go in and fill in the gaps, but you're going to have to get through chapter 16 for Friday. Listen to it, read it, take notes, highlight, take it a little bit at a time. That's really the only way you're going to get through this, okay, and do well with it. All right, I'm gonna shift gears into Ben Franklin, okay? So put the books away, pull the laptops out. So an aphorism is a short, witty statement about life. So here's some that you may be familiar with. A penny saved is a penny earned. Good. How about don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today? Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. All right. How about this one? 3 may keep a secret if 2 of them are. How many of y'all watched Pretty Little Liars when y'all were younger? Dead. Yeah. Those are all aphorisms, folks. What, Christian? Oh, Gusher, capital G. Okay. And what you're going to do is look at about 40 aphorisms. You're not going to have to explain every one of them, but you're going to read all of them. And then you're going to get into a Google form and you're going to select 5 that you like. And you're going to put them in your own words. In other words, explain them. And then think of a scene or an example from today's time that illustrate that aphorism. And it can be a scene from a film, a book, a television show, maybe a song lyric, or even a personal experience. Okay? So y'all open up the aphorisms and read through all of them first. And then if you want to get started in the Google form, do so. But you got to be careful with those. I think if you close the tab, then it's hard to get back into it, right? Am I right about that? I get nothing from y'all. Like what? I mean, can y'all get back into a Google form that you start? No? Okay. So it may be that you, with the time given, because we got about 15 minutes, you just want to look at everything and choose the 5 and start kind of thinking about how you would relate them to today's time, and then maybe do the Google form tonight, okay? But anyway, get that done, and we'll talk about it when we can, okay?